the Biosecure Act was touted or has been touted as a big game changer. We thought, let's understand the brass tacks of this. And we spoke to Jonathan Hunt and Sibaji Biswas of Syngene on the opportunities that could arise from this and the impact on pharma companies at large and Syngene in particular. Listen into a small slice of that conversation.
I think actually it sits on top of a broader trend. And you've really got to look, over the longer term. There's been a gradual sort of rising of competition between particularly the US and China. There's a real sense politically in the US that, as the China economy has grown, that it becomes a direct competitor to the US's sort of global economic leadership. And the politicians there have had rising concerns for a while around when does that relationship go from being collaborative to one that's directly competitive. So that's at sort of the political level, and this has been rising for a number of years. If you look then at individual industries and firms, I think actually the Biosecure Act is a piece of legislation. I'll say a little bit more on that in a minute. Sits really on top of this broader concern that we've all got, and really the COVID pandemic heightened it in boardrooms around the world. What's your supply chain resilience? Have we all over the last decade or more overstretched our supply chains so they become ever more efficient, but if it's too taut, it snaps, and you don't really have that sort of fallback built-in redundancy and resilience. All your eggs in one basket, wherever the basket is and however good the basket is still a single source risk. And I think so that COVID taught a lot of, many industries that we'd gone too far in that direction. So there's a sort of macro trend there about balancing supply chains, building in dual source redundancy. And then you add on top of that a specific piece of legislation in the Biosecure Act for our industry, which calls out 5 specific Chinese firms that the government believes may be aiding state-level competition between the two countries, and they're looking potentially to prohibit American corporations, and particularly those that receive government funding, from working with them. But that sits on top of this broader trend. So opportunity for us, well, India as an economy and companies like Syngene in our industry are possibly the closest in capability and scale to what the Chinese leading firms offer, and therefore we become an obvious choice if people want to switch. And that really has been the trend of the last year, is our customers coming to India, many of them for the first time, probing, testing, auditing, searching, and trying to see, are we ready and are we able to fill some of that gap as they want to rebalance their supply chain. So I think the Biosecure Act sits on top of it. It really focuses the attention. But the underlying trend is there anyway, which is it's around supply chain resilience, choice. And I think we're well positioned as a company. And then I think for more broadly the Indian economy, it creates a favorable environment.
Certainly. But how longer term is this, Jonathan? As a follow-up there before I get in Sibaji in the conversation as well. How long-term out is this? Because you are right that there is an underlying trend. Maybe this sits on top of it, but because it has been passed, there is a specific impact of this, which a lot of people are not quite able to comprehend. So can you outline that for us a bit? And I'll ask actually the same question to Sibaji after that.
Sure. Yeah. We can chime in together. I'd go back to the first draft of the legislation, and the way it was first written, it looked very much like it was going to trigger almost a crash dive for the entire industry because the timelines were very short. It was suggesting that you had to get this done inside of 12 months. And then you've got to go back to the nature of pharmaceuticals and biotechnology. These are very long cycle industries, very long cycles around technology. And quite rightly so. If you think about it, we're trying to innovate and find new medicines. They need a rigor in testing and in development. You want to be really certain before you start exposing a new chemical entity to patients around the world. You want to be confident on its efficacy. You want to be confident on its safety. And it requires a long-term investment. It takes between 8 and 12 years to discover and develop a new drug before you get it to the very first patient that's going to take it. That then means that the supply chains are equally long-term and rigorous and audited and regulated. And that means that the industry's pace of change, its direction of change is clear. Its pace of change is very, very sort of moderated and controlled because we have to get it right. And that then I think indicates, I think this is a positive wind for 5 years, for a decade. It's not for the next 5 weeks or the next 5 months. So the legislation will play out, I think, during the political cycle in the next year in the US. But I think the rate of change that I'm seeing from customers is very controlled, very planful. Because if they're uncoupling a manufacturing supply chain, it could take you 2 years, even if you're going at a sprint to do a tech transfer, because of the amount of regulatory control that's needed, the amount of proof and evidence. So, powerful force going in a favorable direction. I think it plays out over the next 5 and 10 years. I don't think it's an immediate overnight sensation over the next 5 weeks or so. But that's pretty good. I mean, there aren't many industries can look forward and say, I can see a favorable wind for 5 and 10 years.
A big thing as well. Sibaji, you want to add something to this?
Yes, I think we are already seeing some healthy lead indicators, but as Jonathan pointed out, it's a long-term, mid to long-term, 5 to 10 years trend. We are seeing a lot more inquiries, a lot more pilot projects. It's basically, the companies are trying to test and then grow. So it's a phase where many of those international innovator firms are building confidence in the Indian organizations, particularly if they've never worked with Indian companies. But it's a 5 to 10 year trend. It's very pragmatic because even to scale up to the kind of volumes that today happens out of China, it will take time even for the Indian organizations. So it's a good 5 to 10 years traction that we are able to see.
Yeah, no, but Sibaji, my follow-up would be that it's an opportunity for the longer term. Does it come into effect for lack of a better sentence, does it start showing in your books very late, or does it happen? And when does this happen? I mean, let's just kind of get that out of the way.
It will build up gradually. As Jonathan mentioned, it is not a 5-week trend.
Yeah.
As I mentioned, that there are a lot of inquiries, RFPs, pilot projects. Those, when they convert into bigger opportunities over the next 12 months, 18 months, 24 months, they will start showing up in the financials as well. But it's not a trend for the next quarter, the following quarter. But as we have guided previously, that from second half onwards, we expect to see improved growth and improved top line performance. That's where I see the trend beginning. But it's again a trend over the next 5 years at least.
I'm glad we laid it out. So it's for the patient guy to look at this. It's a long game, viewers. Remember, Jonathan has been candid enough, Sibaji is candid enough to say it's not a 5-week sprint, if you will. Now, Jonathan, fill us in on what you think one could be the client considerations in light of the Biosecure Act about when they go out and choose the partners, and your strategy to take advantage of this legislation that has been passed.
Yeah, sure. Let's split it into the different bits of our business. So research, discovery, development, manufacturing, and look at it through those lenses. I mean, one of the behaviors, that change in the legislation where they extended the sunset clause from get this done in a year to do it over sort of 8 years out to 2032, that changed the behavior really quickly, because an awful lot of research projects are, back-to-back series of 12 months, 18 months programs, and you work on a program, you get to a scientific outcome. At that point, you decide whether you're going to reinvest and do the next phase of the discovery. I think at that point, many clients decided, look, we'll let what's in China run its course. It's only got a year to go. It's only got 6 months to go. So we'll let that run its course. And then the focus becomes, where are we placing the next piece of work if successful? So, our response to that, as you'd expect, is dial up your visibility, make sure that your sales and marketing, make sure that you're front of mind with those customers and that you're giving them the options. But the option is for what they do next once this phase of their work is completed. So we're pitching on, phase 2, phase 3 of their programs, and that's predicated on them being scientifically successful. So that's a little bit of the tone and the tenor on the research side. On the development manufacturing, it's similar, but it's much more structured. If you wanted to move manufacturing a product from, an operating unit in China and you wanted to move it to India, it might be 2 years of technology transfer. You've got to revalidate all of the processes. You've got to make sure the regulators support what you're doing before you even get to the first batch. It might take them a year to do that sorting and selection. So even going at a sprint in this industry might be 3 years before you're starting to do the operational work and see it in your revenue. But that's the same for everybody. So, my P&L will build in the same way as my competitors. That's just the rate of pace in the industry. I think the other bit that you're also seeing, which sits outside of the Biosecure Act, is just a long-term cyclical trend that you see, particularly with the bigger biopharma companies. As you know, they tend to have these surges in innovation and success, and then that, of course, inverts as the patent on those products expires. That creates a revenue dip for them, and they're constantly looking to find ways to infill and paper over that. And it's a combination of either accelerating their internal programs, but also managing their costs. That's quite a trend at the moment. You see a number of companies restructuring, reorganizing how they operate their business, and that's also creating an additional opportunity for us. Can we do things for them out of our India operations that they traditionally would have done in the West, but can we do it with scale and flexibility and quite often an operating cost advantage? So there's more than two positive drivers in the industry at the moment.
Very interesting. So, okay, so that's it's interesting to note that there are pulls and pressures around this as well. And therefore, Sibaji, the question that would come to mind is that because the street believes that CDMO players are the ones which will benefit, and it might be a long game, but do inquiries and therefore, as you say, RFQs sometimes inquiries, sometimes initial orders, testing orders. When do these start showing up? Part one of my question is that. Part two is, and both you and Jonathan can, in his words, chime in. Once you cross the first leg of this small order, maybe clients come in with a smaller order first. Is there a J-curve effect in how they approach it, because they will need supplies and the Chinese supplies are definitely going off?
Yes, so we already have spoken about it over the last 6 months. In the run-up to our July quarterly results, which we declared, we had seen 50% higher RFPs and inquiries. We spoke about that, and that trend continues even today. So I think in terms of customers reaching out to us, that has already begun. The small projects will take its own time, and the pilot projects has its own duration. But over a period of next, as I said, 1 year, 2 years, they will start converting into bigger opportunities. Of course, the execution is very important over there. So the leadership team over here is fully focused on executing it well, so that we build a necessary level of confidence that can then put us in a good trajectory for the next 5 years. But again, it will start showing up over a period of time and build up over the next few years.
Jonathan, please continue.
Make a comment on that. Remember, one of the reasons investors on the street are enthusiastic around the opportunity for India and for CROs, CDMOs, is because that nature of that work is inherently very sticky. Once you are ingrained and you're working together and you're delivering, the transaction costs and the challenges of moving it to another location, another site, or another supplier, those barriers are quite challenging. There's very good reasons to stay where you are. So the stickiness creates part of the attraction of it as a business model, and therefore it gives you good long-term visibility on your cash flows and your profitability. At the same time, it's sticky with the incumbents. So disconnecting or decoupling out of China, you've got to overcome that same stickiness. That's why it takes a little bit of time. So the direction it travels there's good reasons to do it, about rebalancing supply chain risk, as well as sort of, the driver of the Biosecure Act and the geopolitics. But you can't sort of like the attraction of it being a sticky, stable, long-term business and then complain, but it takes a while to switch it. It's the same, two sides of the same issue.
Yeah, fair call. Okay, in which case, I'll flip, not flip really, but ask an extension to this question. If indeed some of these things take time to get proven and proof of concept or what have you, how do companies such as yours, which will be participating in this, get the confidence to incur the capex cost? Because the timelines are not necessarily known, or even if the timelines are known, that you will get orders, let's say in maybe a couple of years' time, because you have confidence in your capability. The size of the orders will not be known while you're doing the pilot. So how are you preparing yourself for the upcoming quote-unquote wave?
Yeah, sure. Well, some of it is the capex that we've already put in and the headroom in our own organization. We've deliberately been investing in recent years for growth, not only from the China rotation, but because we see in general there's a structural shift to outsourcing, and there's a structural shift to outsourcing to companies like us that have got good capabilities and can match the service levels in the West. But we do it with a scale and a flexibility and an operating cost arbitrage that's attractive. So there's a headroom for growth in our business already. But you'd have to look, maybe it's the difference between a CEO and a CFO. What a nice problem to have, that we're going to have to debate whether or not we put more capex in because we think there might be more demand in the market than we previously predicted.
Well, that's Syngene, and gives you an idea of the CRDMO opportunity because of the Biosecure Act. The whole conversation will be on our digital handles, and I'm sure it'll play out later on in the day on television as well.